The purpose of this video is to review how ionic bonds are different from covalent bonds. So we made this table to briefly overview how some things are unique to ionic bonds and other features are unique to covalent bonds. Because we've talked about both during class now, it's nice to really just kind of focus in, okay, what are some of the key points of each? One of the key differences is the type of elements that each type of bond has. So ionic bonds form between metals and nonmetals, whereas covalent bonds form as a bond between nonmetals and other nonmetals. So covalent bonds form between all nonmetals. Ionic bonds have a metal and a nonmetal. Remember, metals are to the left of the bold staircase on your periodic table. Nonmetals are to the right of that staircase. And so if it's an ionic bond, you're having something from the left side of that staircase bonding with something from the right side of that staircase. For covalent bonds, they're pretty much all to the right side of that staircase. Keep in mind that hydrogen is the only nonmetal listed on the left side of the staircase. It is in group 1, even though it is a nonmetal. Another key difference between ionic and covalent bonds is how the bond is actually formed. For ionic bonds, these type of chemical bonds are formed by transferring valence electrons from one atom to another. Whereas covalent bonds are formed by sharing valence electrons. So when I mean something or an atom is transferring electrons, it is physically giving one electron from one atom to another atom. So metals will give up their electrons and give them to nonmetals in an ionic bond. Whereas covalent bonds, because they're both nonmetals, they're not going to give up electrons. They can't receive electrons from other nonmetals. So instead, they share valence electrons. Now, these two types of bonds are modeled slightly different to basically show that it's transferring or that it's sharing valence electrons. So in ionic bonds, to show that electrons are being transferred from one atom to another, we are using arrows to show that metals are giving up electrons where nonmetals are receiving electrons. So arrows are used to show electron transfer. I'm going to say metals to nonmetals. Whereas covalent bonds, circles are used to show shared pairs of electrons. So one way that I think might help you guys as you're kind of studying here is I'm just going to draw a little picture for ionic bonds. If you think of I for ionic, if you do an I, okay, that kind of looks like an arrow. So I for ionic kind of looks like an arrow, whereas covalent bonds, if you write C for covalent, it's kind of like a circle. So I don't know if that helps you, but the I for ionic, I kind of think of as an arrow. C for covalent, I kind of think as like almost a full circle. So that's one way that might help you remember which one is happening with each type of bond. The last way that these are different is what unique features this bond has. So for ionic bonds, written in red here, ionic bonds form what we call ions, which are charged particles. These form due to atoms gaining or losing valence electrons. So when you're looking at an ionic bond, you have to think about what charge your nonmetal is getting and then what charge your metal is receiving now that it has lost valence electrons. Covalent bonds do not form ions. Instead, covalent bonds have either single, double, or triple bonds. These form due to sharing pair valence electron. So just kind of an extra thing to keep in mind for ionic bonds, you have to think about what ions are formed, what the charge of each atom is as a result of the bond. For covalent bonds, you have to think how many pairs of shared electrons are there between two atoms within your bond. And so these are some of the key differences between ionic and covalent bonds. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask your teacher for more help.